get started because we have an hour, basically an hour, and we're talking about multiple centers here. So I'm Jennifer Gunn. I'm the director of the Institute for Advanced Study, and I'm going to introduce our other speakers and just say that we're having this information session because many people don't plan far enough ahead for the IDF application, and they don't realize that there are actually two deadlines. There's an October 21st deadline by which you need to apply to a center that you would like to work with for your IDF. And then that there's a final deadline of getting materials to the graduate school, which includes a run back through your DGS on November 15th. So we thought we'd each explain our processes, and I'll just say who's going to speak, and then they can rotate through. And also to say that Kathy Jordan from the Institute on the Environment is here, and she's also happy, she's sitting in the back, but she's also happy to answer questions during the Q&A about an IDF at the Institute on the Environment. So our first speaker is going to be J.B. Shank from the Department of History, who will be talking on behalf of the Center for Early Modern History and the Center for Medieval Studies. I'm going to talk for the IAS. After that, Karen Brown from the Interdisciplinary Center for Global Change, for the Study of Global Change, will come next. Then Gina Ramori from the Minnesota Population Center and Life Course Centers. And then Juliette Cherboulier will be talking about how to make a strong IDF proposal. And then we should have about 30 minutes for Q&A. So without further ado, JB.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I'm the director of the Center for Early Modern History, which since 2014 has been linked together in a consortium with the Center for Medieval Studies, some libraries and other entities under the label of the Consortium for the Study of the Premodern World. And the Consortium for the Study of the Premodern World includes my center and Center for Medieval Studies. And we've more or less used all three entities in a way as one IDF home. All three are linked to the same office, which is in Heller 1030. And we don't differentiate, say, medieval from early modern or global pre-modern, as we're understanding it, from other things. So the destination, if you do an IDF, to come to us is all three of those, any one of those, whatever makes sense, right, for you. We have been hosting IDFs pretty much, I think, since the beginning, pretty early on. We've had 7. We've had most years we've had 1, and 1 year we had 2. And the disciplinary mixes, we've had 2 people from English, 1 from Spanish and Portuguese, 1 from History of Science and Technology, 1 from Sociology, and 1 from Geography, or whatever Geography is now, Geography or Environment Science. We have our basic procedure is to accept all applicants who want to be at the center as viable candidates. In other words, we don't vet. We don't say to some group, we're going to support you, and others that we don't. We let the IDF people do that. It's as you, I hope, know, it's a super competitive fellowship. There have traditionally been about 20 given across the university. So if the IDF determines that one of the people is a good candidate and wants to be at our center, we say great. So we don't do any vetting ourselves. We accept everybody. And if you're awarded a fellowship, we also offer you an office which you can use if that's helpful, a kind of home base administratively, and a research stipend, additional research stipend that has been typically in the $1,000 to $1,500 range. I'm not quite sure exactly where it's at this point, which is just free to use for your own research. I think the last thing I'll say is that why we're, I think, a good site. We are by nature, this entity is by nature extremely multidisciplinary. It is a good, I mean, what my experience with the IDF is if you want to have the most competitive application, you need to present overt, obvious cross-disciplinarity. Many people don't think of, for example, history and sociology as that different, whereas mathematics and literature, that's big differences, right? And I think what makes our center successful is that we have that kind of built-in multidisciplinarity. We also, I think the other thing is we have an ongoing set of programs, workshops. Many IDFs have started their own workshops as part of the IDF year, and that's what the CSPW supports in general. And we have lecture series, we have reading groups, and other sorts of things. So if the goal of the IDF is to really have a year where you're integrating all the time across disciplines, our center is sort of naturally set up with all kinds of activities that happen whether we have IDF or not. So I think I'll stop there. That gives you a sense, and you know, feel free to ask questions afterwards if you have any more precise questions. Thanks.
No. Okay. Hi. Okay, so I want to talk briefly about the IDF at the IAS. So if you are an IDF at the IAS, you are part of an interdisciplinary community of fellows. We have weekly work in progress lunches where you will present your work. This community is made up of faculty residential fellows. You will be there for a year, they will be there for 1 semester, so they change each semester. And also we have visiting scholars from other institutions and what we call scholars and artists in residence who are often community members. So we've had a playwright, we've had visual artists, we've had a sustainability activist. In addition to the weekly works in progress, we have a kind of informal tea time once a week. We have our public programs like IAS Thursday that we expect you to participate in at least some of those. And we also will give you an office, a computer, and a office or cubicle, and computer and some professional development money as JB just discussed, which you can use for conference travel, buying books, you know, whatever you need. Because we have those commitments to other people to be in that residential space, like the faculty fellows, we are limited in our capacity. And so typically we get 20 to 30 IDF applications, and we have an internal selection committee that will select usually 6 or 7 that we nominate to the IDF committee overall. And that selection committee is made up of members of our advisory board, and the reason in part that you need to get in your applications to us by October 21st is so that selection committee has time to meet, but also because we, the center directors, each have to write a letter to go along with the nomination, and we have to send it back to your DGS to do the final processing. So we have a handout on the table. It has very detailed instructions. If you have questions like about whether a faculty member you want to work with is eligible as a mentor, there's a list, but you can also call and ask us. There are very specific instructions about what to put in the subject line when you submit your application so we don't lose it and don't miss it, I guess I would say. If you have any questions, we're available to ask. All this information is on our website with active links. Susanna, as well as I are happy to answer questions. And I would say historically, we've had anywhere from 0 IDFs, that has happened at least 1 year, to 6 or 7. So 5. Oh, well, I guess we had a Community of Scholars Fellow that year. Okay, so this year we have 4. If you have, we're happy to entertain questions and talk to you more. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Karen Brown from the Interdisciplinary Center for the Study of Global Change. And then we'll keep moving until we get to Q&A.
So I'm Karen Brown. I'm the director of Icgc, the Interdisciplinary Center for the Study of Global Change, as Jennifer mentioned. And the first thing you have to do when you're an IDF at ICGC is learn our name, because it's a challenge. So some of you, I recognize some faces in the room, but some of you might not know what ICGC does. So ICGC is a campus-wide interdisciplinary center focused on the Global South and global social justice. So the affiliates with our center tend to be working on various questions of power and inequality in various fields in the Global South. So one thing that is somewhat unique about the center is that we have scholars from the humanities, the social sciences, and the natural sciences all in a sustained conversation over time. We have a core program called the Icgc Scholars Fellowship Program, and the IDFs who are in residence at Icgc interact with and work with those fellows and become part of that community. We have a very, really a quite vibrant and close community of fellows and faculty. We have about 85 current graduate fellows, and we have about 85 current affiliated faculty members. So people who tend to want to place their IDF at Icgc are working on issues related to the Global South, issues of social justice-oriented issues. And I suggest if you're thinking about Icgc, just take a look at our website and you'll see the kinds of projects that people at Icgc tend to work on. IDFs at Icgc, we have had them since about the beginning of the program, since 2012. We every year have 1 or 2 in residence. Some years it's 2, some years it's 1. So we've had 9 since 2012. And they would be happy to speak with you if anyone has questions about being an IDF at Icgc. I'm happy to put you in contact with one of them. Like the Institute for Advanced Study, we have an internal selection process. Some years we nominate everyone who applies to us if it's a small number, but most years we don't. We review all the applications and identify who we think is the best fit with the center and with the faculty mentor you've identified, and then we nominate from there. But we generally nominate the majority of people who apply to be affiliated with Icgc. So what is it like to have an IDF residency at Icgc? We provide you with a workspace. We provide you with a research stipend, research funds, as the other directors have mentioned. We give you access to really a strong, sustained community. And once you're an IDF at Icgc, if you wish to be, you continue to be affiliated throughout your time here at the university. We also have a number of activities you can be involved in. The only thing we ask our IDFs to do is attend our Friday talk series. We have a noontime Icgc Brown Bag talk series. We ask you to come to that. And otherwise, you can participate in as few or as many of our other activities as you wish. We have research circles on various topics, conferences, symposia, seminars. You're welcome to all of those things if you wish. I think those are the basics of being an IDF at Icgc. I guess the other thing I'd mention is beyond the Interdisciplinary Doctoral Fellows, we have other international visiting scholars in residence each year. So our IDFs are typically part of an 8 to 10 member cohort of visiting international fellows. We have a partnership in South Africa with the University of the Western Cape, and we have 2 or 3 people in residence from that university each year, and we also have other international visiting scholars. For example, we currently have an exchange with a Brazilian university where doctoral fellows are in residence. So you'd be part of a cohort of fellows in that context. I brought some material on Icgc. It's laying on the table there. There's a brochure about the center to give you a sense of what we do. And there's also a faculty affiliates list, which is what you'll need to look at if you want to identify a faculty mentor from Icgc. The website for those documents, the link is also provided there. So I encourage you to take a look at that, and I am always happy to meet with you if you're thinking about applying for an Icgc IDF residency. I'm happy to talk with you and discuss the fit and also help you identify a faculty mentor. So I can answer questions later, and I will now turn it over to the next speaker.
Yep.
So this is Gina Ramori, and I just want to say after that excellent job that JD and Karen did, I failed to say that the IES is the university's interdisciplinary center to support collaborative and innovative research, and we support all disciplines and professional schools across campus.
Gina Ramori from the Minnesota Population Center.
Hi, as Jen said, I'm Gina Ramori, and I'm representing 2 centers as part of the Institute for Social Research and Data Innovation, which houses the Minnesota Population Center, the Life Course Center, the IPMS Data Projects, and a Census Federal Data Research Center. Of those 4 centers, the LCC, the Life Course Center, and the Minnesota Population Center both host IDFs. This year, the Life Course Center has its first IDF candidate because it's its first year as a university-wide interdisciplinary research center. MPC has also had them from the beginning. I don't know that we've had a 0 year, but usually we have between 1 and 4 IDF fellows. The other thing we have is a very large, well, let me say a little bit about each center. So the Minnesota Population Center supports, we're inside the Office of the Vice President for Research. We support faculty members from 10 colleges and 26 departments. And anything population studies related. So we study basic demography, so fertility, mortality, education, migration, but also much broader. And we also house the world's largest collection of census and survey data, which is all freely available and funded by the National Institutes for Health and National Science Foundation. The Life Course Center focuses on the study of timing of processes across the life. So we have faculty who are highly quantitative and overlap with the Pop Center, and faculty who are more qualitative. Our IDF we are hosting this year is, for instance, looking at the timing of police violence in the life course and what that has to do for health outcomes for Black women. So those are our 2 centers. We also have a large, thriving community of graduate students, which makes us, I think, a really fun place to do an IDF. I think we have 6 of our grad students in the audience today. Right now we have 20 trainees who are getting either training in population studies or population health. We often have about 50 graduate RAs working for us. And so if you do an IDF at MPC or LCC, you get to integrate into that community. We have weekly scholarly development meetings, weekly seminar series, and throughout this semester we have workshops where we bring in people to work on grant proposal writing or how to give a good presentation, things like that. Our application process, the benefits, so that is one of the benefits. We also have a research stipend. I think they're very similar to the other centers. And our application process is also similar. Our internal deadline is October 21st. You will need to identify a mentor, either at the Life Course Center or the Pop Center, because we have about 100 faculty members associated with each. The flyer I brought, there's a list, and you can look. If you are not sure about finding a mentor, there's also an email address, and our training director may be able to help match you up with the right person if you feel like we would be a good home for your IDF. And yeah, I'll be happy to answer questions about MPC or LCC during the open Q&A.
Hi, I'm Julia Chevalier, and I'm a former member of the IDF committee. And I have to say this is one of my favorite committees to serve on. I served with folks from really all across the university, and that's a boon for me and a challenge for everybody who wants to apply, right? So I wanted to direct you to, if you're considering applying for an IDF, I want to direct you to the graduate students website where they have a handy page entitled Interdisciplinary Doctoral Fellowship. And it actually has the criteria we use on it. And believe it or not, we often get folks who didn't look at the criteria. So the first thing you can do is look at those criteria and decide, is this the right fellowship for me? And is this the right time for me to be applying for this fellowship? And those are 2 really important things you can do for yourself, and it's good for your research to figure this out. This fellowship isn't for everybody. So just one little historical piece on this. The fellowship was originally conceived of as a way to help graduate students at the University of Minnesota break through or just climb over institutional hurdles. So what that means is that this fellowship is most appropriate for folks who cannot get the interdisciplinary work done that they want to do in the graduate program. Your work might be already interdisciplinary because your program might be an interdisciplinary program. But if the work you're doing is already able to be done within your graduate program, you're fine. You don't need this, according to them. I mean, everybody needs one of these, right? It's fantastic. But according to the committee, they're going to have a hard time justifying giving you this fellowship when there's somebody else who literally can't get the research done because their program doesn't allow it programmatically, right? So I think that that's something really important for people to think about. So when they say that the major criterion, the top criterion is the interdisciplinary nature of the research program, what they mean is that's integrating disciplines not represented in your grad program. The kicker is that's not your department, it's your grad program, right? So I just want to be sure about that distinction, because there are folks here in graduate programs within departments that are super diverse in their approaches, right? So I just wanted to note that. So the first question I think you need to ask yourself is, can it get done in your program? Then this isn't for you, okay? Another thing is do you need it now? One really important criterion that they changed was that you have to your graduation date can't be before spring 2022, right? Okay. And what that means is that pretty recently the graduate school has realized that really, really good interdisciplinary work really sometimes needs to be done fairly early on in a graduate researcher's career, right? Not at the very end, where your models are set, your ideas are set, you know, you're done. What are you going to, how are you going to adopt a different paradigm and integrate it into your work? So they're now thinking about this a little differently, right? So the question that I have asked myself is, does this project need to integrate this research now, right? So I think that that's a really important thing for you to think about too, whether the project needs to have the research done now. Some clues about whether that's the case. If your mentor is already on your doctoral committee, you've already made that link, right? Not necessarily, nothing I say is hard and fast here, this is just my perspective, right? But if your mentor is your advisor, I think you're fine, right? I'm like, well, you've already made the connection. There has been no hurdle for you to do this, right? If they're already on your committee, that might give a committee member pause, right? It's so nice to see familiar faces. I'm nervous speaking, so I keep on looking at people I know. So so sorry that there's like two sides of the room getting all the attention, but I'll try to look at some strangers. If you've already had a fellowship, with the center, that's going to be really hard, right? Because you've already made that connection, okay? And the most important question for me is, does the research need this now? I'm not on this committee anymore, right? So I just want to be clear that I'm not going to be sitting upon judgment on anybody here, but I want to tell you how I perceive these. So I think that this fellowship for you is if you have an aspect of your research that could benefit from integration with a mentor or with a center through which your mentor is a kind of a conduit or an aid or a support right now, right, in the next coming years. And that burden is not just on you, but it's also on, the great extent is on the project proposal, but also then again on the mentor and on the advisor's letters and on the center to a certain extent. I want to talk about two myths about the IDF committee really quick. First of all, there is a myth that it's biased against humanists and social scientists. It isn't. It isn't at all. Proposals are vetted in the most beautiful way. Proposals are vetted by folks from a diversity of disciplines, and the top proposals are often appreciated by a real cross-disciplinary perspective, right? So some of my favorite proposals have been in the super hard sciences, which I stopped taking in 10th grade, okay? What that also means is that there are hard scientists out there who can talk about their work to somebody who cannot read a graph, okay? I just gotta say, I can't read those charts, and it's possible to do that kind of translational work. So I think one myth too is that you need to use what I would call the vernacular of your discipline to talk about your work. That's not true, right? You can use vocabulary that folks not in your discipline, smart, grounded, well-read folks not in your discipline can understand to appreciate your work. And that's a hurdle for a lot of people, but that's where vetting your proposals with folks outside of your own discipline can be really helpful, and I just think that that's helpful whether you apply for the IDF or not, right? That's helpful for almost every broad fellowship. Another myth is that everybody in it is interdisciplinary. That's not true, but what we're doing is we're reading across disciplines for which research right now is really in need of a push to get across an institutional hurdle at the U, right? So that's also really important to I think I can stop there. That's okay? Should we take questions now?
Yes. And I guess for those of us who are prepared to answer questions, we should probably come up front and be standing heads. But while we're getting started, I thought I'd just ask Kathy Jordan from the Institute on the Environment to just say a few words about the IDF at the INE.
Oh, great. Did I jump?
No, I
jumped.
No, I did.
You
No,
jumped
no,
up.
I did
You
this.
pushed me forward. She punched me.
Hi, everybody. I'm Associate Director for Leadership and Education at the Institute on the Environment. And I just want to say a couple of features of the IDF at IONE. We're all about acronyms. IDF, IONE. We are a really, as everybody here, a very interdisciplinary center at the intersection of natural sciences, social sciences, humanities. Everybody's sort of focused on planetary health and the interaction of humans in the natural world. We would integrate you into our Boreas Leadership Program, which is targeted at graduate students and providing some really interesting and creative professional development experiences, including things like use of improv and theater and learning how to present your science to the public and to the media and things like that. You would have the opportunity to integrate into some activities that various of our affiliates, we have senior faculty affiliates, junior faculty affiliates, and educators, as well as visiting scholars. You are welcome to be part of those. We also are doing book clubs on things related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there's just a variety of things that you would be integrated into, and like all the other fellowships, you would get some research money, some workspace, and the opportunity, I think, to set up some conversations and coffees with some folks who've had some really interesting, diverse career trajectories in academia and outside of academia. It's a really cool group of people that you would have some access to. So I'll stop there and we'll do Q&A.
Great. So the thing we ask in Q&A is just because actually some of us may be reading your proposals as part of our selection committee, is just think about your question in the most general way as opposed to about the specifics of your proposal. So the floor is open. Yeah.
Hi, I was wondering, what would you recommend as the best way to approach a faculty member who you might be interested in working with, or just generally kind of discussing who works on what within your center?
Should I take that? Well, I think people from the centers can talk about that too, because they know their faculty as well. So maybe I'm going to talk from a center perspective, because I also direct the Center for the Consortium for the Study of the Premodern World. So I'm just going to flip on that. But I think the best way is to think about who, first of all, to talk with your committee members and your advisor about who could support me going in this direction, and then go talk to them about that, about whether you think they could really support it, and then talk to them about the IDF, because making the connection to that person might be a great thing anyway for your committee, whether you get the IDF or not. So I would start there. I tend to start with my mentors I already have, my advisor, my committee member, but I don't know if other people have, I mean, I know that a lot of the larger centers have actually lists of affiliated faculty, so if you're really dead set on working with a center, and I think there are some centers here where, in fact, affiliation to the center itself is really what's going to drive it. The mentor is an important presence, but sometimes it's even more so the center. And that's kosher for these applications. You don't get dinged for that. That's actually a really great thing. So there are some applications that are more toward the mentor and others that are maybe more toward the center, or a mix of those, right? So if there's a center you want, you can contact, I mean, I think that you spoke to that, and I can't remember, I think you spoke to that a little bit, so.
I think my question is a little bit before the step that you were talking about.
Yep.
Like, just kind of identifying that person.
So I think where it connects with what Juliet said is actually that you're thinking about what are the different skill sets or perspectives, disciplinary skill sets or perspectives that you think would help your work. And talking to your own advisor is probably step one. But then also thinking about, okay, I need a different kind of quantitative skill than I have. Or I think I might need ethnography. And if you don't know, if you don't get recommendations, specific recommendations, then I think all of us as center directors are happy to help make suggestions. And the thing I would say about approaching the mentor is, first talk and figure out whether they are the person that has the skills you need to add to your sort of portfolio for your dissertation. And then the second thing is ask what they think the mentoring relationship would be. I mean, do they want to meet with you every, a couple of times a semester? What do they want to read something together with you? What is in a practical sense, what would that mentorship look like, and see if that works for you and for them as well.
I was just gonna say, which is kind of what Jennifer just said, that if you're talking about that sort of gap between having an idea of what might be of interest, a zone, and trying to find who the person or people might be who would serve that role. I know in the case of me and my center as a director, I can play that role. If someone, and this has happened in the past, where someone has come to me to talk about being an affiliate at the center at large, but also to have me help them target, given what you're talking about, I think you might want to talk to this person or that person. And so, at least in my case, that's one of the roles I think we as center directors play in helping with that.
That's true for me as well. So I encourage people who are applying. Some people have a great plan that they've already put in place. They've talked to their advisor. They know who they want to work with. But if you aren't sure, you don't know, just set up a time to come chat with me. And I know our affiliated practice quite well, and I can help you identify somebody who would make sense for you to approach. And then, of course, it's up to that faculty member whether that works with them.
And to follow up on that, if you do send an email, describe your research and what you want to do and what kind of training. It's really, we get so many every year that say, I want to do an IDF at LCC or MPC, and we can't do anything. I mean, that's nice, but we need to know what you want to do, who you want to work with, or what kind of work you want to do. So I think it's really helpful either approaching a mentor or a center director to have an elevator speech ready, a couple sentences. Otherwise, honestly, when I get those emails, I don't even know what to do with them. So I think it's very helpful. You need to have at least an idea in your head and articulate it clearly, and then we can be more helpful.
There's a question.
Okay, thank you very much for all of those presentations. I am Famara Damfa. I am in the Natural Resource Science and Management PhD program. So my question really focuses on this idea of an interdisciplinary scholar and an interdisciplinary research. So I consider myself an interdisciplinary scholar by training from undergrad all the way to PhD level. Now, how do you distinguish that from an interdisciplinary research that is like from a student who is actually not an interdisciplinary student but wanted to, get some cross-disciplinary ideas in the work that he or she is doing? So I just want a distinction around that. And if you do, could you, in the application, how do you
Negotiate that?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's a super question, and the way you articulated it, I think is going to be helpful for other people in this room. If I understand the distinction you're making, this is for the second group. This is for the folks who are maybe not, who are in a very particular discipline, who need to go into another discipline.
Mm-hmm.
So you might be rigorously trained in one thing, and you may need to go into another. If you are trained in an interdisciplinary field, and I know there's a bunch of people whose fields are really interdisciplinary, if your work is staying with in that interdisciplinary field, this isn't the fellowship for you, right? Generally, would you agree with that? Or?
I'd say yes, and.
Yeah.
So we have had a number of IDFs at Icgc who come from interdisciplinary fields like gender, women, and sexuality studies or American studies. And why they're successful, I think, is because of the committee, but why I think they're successful is because they're adding something that they still don't have in their department. For example, they may be working research focused on Africa, and Icgc has a large concentration of individuals whose research is focused on Africa. So they may have interdisciplinarity plus this other dimension that they want to get from the center and the mentor. Another example is from, we had a student who was in literary studies and pretty interdisciplinary already, but had added a chapter to the dissertation on soccer and wanted to work with somebody who specialized in sports internationally. a very specific thing, but, we happen to have a faculty member like that. So those are the kinds of ways, even if you come from an interdisciplinary field, or you have an interdisciplinary background, there still may be some important interdisciplinary component you need to add to your work.
Right. And that's right. Like for me, part of what I'm interested in doing is to add an engineering perspective to the problem that I'm working with.
I want
And
to
don't
stop,
have
I want to stop you there because I don't want to get into the details of anybody's projects because if anybody's vetting stuff, so I just want to, and I'm sure people here will entertain questions that are specific afterwards, but, and I think what's so interesting about how you just talked about that is you talked about two really interdisciplinary projects, but the interdisciplinarity of the interdisciplinary project was really clear in the way you talked about it.
Right.
And that's, I think, what a committee member, let's say, from a French professor to a kinesiologist via a statistician, how that's, the language you just used is something we can all get behind, right? We can all understand.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Regarding my question as to when to apply to the fellowship, can you apply again in another year? There are limits to how are secondary applications looked upon by the centers?
So as far as I know, there is no problem with applying again. I think we have definitely, at the IAS, we have definitely had people who applied and didn't make it the first year and applied again, and with success. And so I think the bigger question is, and unlike the doctoral dissertation fellowship, it is the center that's nominating you, not your department. And so the limits are just set by the center's capacity limits. So as JP said, they nominate everybody. Others of us have kind of try to estimate our capacity and likelihood of numbers. I will say this, which presumably your DGS has already told you, the doctoral dissertation fellowship is considered your last fellowship from the university. So you cannot, if you've already had a doctoral dissertation fellowship, you can't apply for the IDF, and I think that's one of the reasons that the committee has stressed that you can apply for the IDF earlier. But yes, you can apply again. I'll just say something that might be on people's minds. So like I know that Icgc and the IAS have faculty mentors in common. In fact, I'd say we have faculty mentors in common with all of the centers here. It is not, as far as we know, it's not illegal to apply to more than one center, but only one center can nominate you. And I think your time and energy is probably best invested on focusing on who is the right mentor for you and polishing up your project.
Yeah, I would say I would add to that. I think it's fine to have conversations with multiple centers, but ultimately, when your department sends forward your application with an endorsement from a center, they can only send one. So before that process happens at the end, you have to make a determination of which center you want to work with.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's new to allow it to be earlier. And as Juliet said, it used to be a very traditional kind of end of your degree fellowship. So, and I like what Juliet said about how to strategize when, but I think this is yet to sort of be known exactly how it's, whether there would be a shift to more earlier career winners and an end altogether to late career, some mix of them. So I think it's hard to gauge right now what the committee is going to do and how they're going to assess it. But I think it is right, as Juliet said, to sort of actually think about when it would be right for you.
Can I raise one other thing that I imagine people might be wondering about, because I've already gotten this question 3 times so far this year, and maybe Juliet, you can speak to this too. Some people ask, do you have to be in residence at the center during the term of your IDF, or can you use the IDF to support being away for field work for a year? And I think centers have different perspectives on that, and the graduate school has a different perspective on that. I actually asked the graduate school this year, and they said that's not how they see the fellowships being intended, because they want you to connect to the center. Having said that, I think there are some cases where people have been away for some of the time for field work. So Juliet, having been on the committee, how was that? Can you say something about how that was looked at?
Well, so I can't say specifically, but I'll say that if I read a proposal where the person said, I want to work with IONE with this person, and I'm going to work with them in that other country.
While that faculty member is doing something in that other country.
Well, no, while that faculty member is actually, you know,
In St.
in
Paul.
St. Paul. How's that going to work? Right? So it would be a feasibility question for us. It's not like you can't do that. We don't allow that. We don't say this is a residential fellowship, for example. And I do think that so the other really weird thing about having been on this committee is that I actually don't know what happened to the folks who got the fellowships, right? And I would love to know about that. But I do know, for example, that we have given an IDF to somebody who did actually end up doing field work. It happened to be not out of the state, but it actually happened to be at a research site of their mentor. That makes a lot of sense. But this is not a fellowship just to do your own research. It really is to connect. But that's going to come through in the application, right? So I think there's not a hard and fast rule about that.
And to follow up on that, the graduate school also said, so for example, if your center has partnerships and research sites somewhere, and the student would be working there and making the connection there, that could be an argument for that. So I think what you just said is the key point, that it can't be just you're going off to do your individual research somewhere, but you'd have to make a case for how you were connecting with the mentor at the center through that process.
Yeah, and I'll just say for the IS, we are a residential fellowship. We think part of the value is being part of that community. That doesn't mean that you can't go off, particularly between semesters or whatever, and do 3 weeks of research something. Okay, question?
Hi, thanks all for your presentations. I had a question about your property general advice about writing that 2-page statement, because it's trying to bring all of your research down into these 2 single-spaced pages. So I was wondering if you had any tips on how to convey your project, the relationship between the center and all that jazz, in only 2 pages.
So let's sit down, shall we? That's a huge question. Oh my goodness, I have like a million things. Does anybody have a succinct way of answering that? Because I could.
No,
could
go
speak to
ahead.
that. Can I call a friend? Just super.
Just say one.
Yep.
I think being very attentive, rather than seeing the project as I need to summarize my research in 2 single-spaced pages. If you see it instead is I need to persuade this committee that my research meets the criteria of this award. Where the first and most important, I would think, would be to show them to use Juliet's language, what is the obstacle currently stopping you from doing what you want to do, and how will this fellowship and this connection with this other center and group of people advance your research. And if you embed it in a sense, the larger conception of your research, its importance, its significance, within a proposal that makes that the prime directive, in a way it sort of solves the problem. You need enough research accounting to make it clear to people. You need to put it into that, universal language that anyone can read outside of your own disciplinary talk. But these are documents designed to make a case in an evaluative process.
Can I add one thing to that? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the other thing to keep in mind is you should definitely mention why the faculty mentor and why the center in your letter, or in your proposal, but keep in mind that the mentor is going to be writing a letter about the fit with your project, and I'm going to be writing a letter, or the center director, about the fit with the center. So you don't have to devote a lot of time in your 2 pages to talking about the fit with the center and the faculty mentor. You should, faculty mentor maybe more so because you're going to be talking about your research with that lens. And again, the center somewhat, but you don't have to go into detail about what the center does and the center's activities and those kind of things, because I'm going to be doing that in my letter. So that's just something to keep in mind.
So, sorry. I work with a lot of our students who are applying to other centers, and I think what has worked well is identifying the large, and I think to speak to JB's point, I also want to say, if you focus the way he's saying, it avoids the jargon issue, because you stay out of the weeds of American studies or engineering. So I was advising to identify the big picture problem and the significance, and then to clearly state on page 1 what cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary training is going to allow you to solve this, and then lay out your research objectives, 1 or 2, maybe 3, but you don't need to go into great detail. And then we always take a paragraph on page 2 and go into great detail about the interdisciplinary training, like what they're gonna get and what that's gonna add. So you preview that right up front, it's clear, but then you give details on what you're gonna get. So in our case, it's often methods, learning new methods that students wouldn't get in their home departments. Maybe that's true of all of these, but I think focusing on the interdisciplinary part keeps you out of the danger of talking to specifically in your disciplinary language.
So you both all reminded me of something that's really important. I think this goes in particular for the IDF. It's not the same as a fellowship for your dissertation research. It's a fellowship to explore, to get over a hurdle, right? And to explore something you can't get within your graduate program. So what that means is that, following up on all these comments, which I absolutely have to agree with, you don't actually have to go into all of the nuts and bolts of your project. What you have to do is give folks a really good idea of what's innovative about your work, and then go specifically into the aspect of the work that's going to be enriched or affected by this if you want to call it this trans or cross or extra-disciplinary intervention, if you want to get away from the word interdisciplinary, which has ceased to have any meaning at all anymore. So I think that that's really important. I say to my own students, you have to tell the truth, but you don't have to give them the whole picture. And sometimes you don't want the whole picture, right? I think it's really important to check your vernacular at the door. Again, I'm not a statistician. I cannot read your computer model. I cannot read Greek, ancient or modern, right? These are vernacular, but there's also, for example, policy vernacular, right? If you do policy work, there's every discipline has its vernacular. Think about how to talk to somebody about your work without using that disciplinary language. I think that's incredibly important. And make sure you're doing that in paragraph 1.
And to I think everybody's point, you do want to be saying why this is an important project. And that's part of grabbing the interest of the reader, is to say why this project is important, and then why you need the additional disciplinary learning.
Innovativeness of the project, and then why this now? Why this interaction? Why this pursuit of this knowledge now? I think
And this is why it matters to have that 2 to 3 sentence elevator speech down. If you can't, in that first paragraph, tell them what you're doing and why it's important, my guess is you're going to lose your reader pretty quickly. How many do you think each person reads?
Oh, it's such a fog. I don't want to speak. I can't even remember how many we got. Over 100. I can't speak to that. I'm so sorry. We read a lot, but I want to tell you, we read a lot. The ones that are fantastic, I could tell you about from 5 years ago. They really stick with you. And I have actually met some of these folks in strange, going to a lecture at IONE, I meet somebody, and I want to be like, so how did the experiment go? And they have no idea who I am, right? And it's but they really stick with you because most of you guys are doing amazing work, right? So that's really important. And if you can articulate that, it really grabs the reader. So.
One question, going back to the idea of how soon or how later in the whole research process, for someone who, has a clear idea of what they want to do, but they're still in that, first year in that exploratory sort of process where I'm completely aware that this collaboration might, change the final outcome. So, how mature those proposals should be? Would you rather them to be at that stage where they're very open and can still morph, or are you looking for something a bit much more grounded that can have those principles much more tangible?
So actually, JB said that this emphasis on the early years is new. It's actually not new, but what was happening is that the more mature proposals were winning out because it was easier to understand what they were doing. And so what this has done is actually put you can't be finishing before such and such a time as a way of making sure
And I think the committee then will understand that those proposals are in more flux. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, has anybody here mentored somebody who was at the earlier stages in their first, second?
We have one right now who's just going into her third year, which seems earlier than.
Okay.
Than it used to be.
Yeah, so we had someone from the grad school come talk at MPC last year about this, and my takeaway was that sort of finishing up coursework, but not really.
Oh, but there are earlier folks too. I think
Yeah.
somebody this
Yeah,
year
they
is
find it-
actually in their second year, so they applied their first year. Because they realized when they got to their program that they really had this amazing thing they wanted to explore, but the program couldn't do it, and that this was gonna be really changing. They came with a kind of data set, I think, and they elaborated it through one of these. So, second year, so.
This gets to different ways of deciding what the nature of one's project is, and what it means to be completing it. And so, hearing, I just want to kind of temper this a little bit. Many of the ones at our center, which are humanities centered projects, humanities and social science, qualitative social sciences, I would not describe as very specific, like, I'm going to accomplish this through my IDF. But what they do have that is part of what you were saying is getting a set of experiences, getting a set of perspectives that are not going to happen if one just stays in the regular degree program. So the one that comes to mind that I think illustrates this was the woman we have from sociology who was working on nostalgia in contemporary Turkey for the old Ottoman past of Turkey, right? The sultans and this and that, and its connection to Islam and this sort of Turkey's modernity versus its antiquity, right? And what she was finding was that in sociology, she was not getting the kind of rich appreciation for the historical sense of this that she thought would be really useful for her research. And so she had the award fairly recently after becoming AD, simply to want to spend a year immersed with historians and others to learn about what it means to study this world without this modern nostalgia, or which she's become part of this nostalgia workshop, because this is actually an interesting phenomenon within modern scholarship of the role of which scholars are nostalgic or not this way. But I thought it was a very compelling, and she won, and a very competitive award, because she had a very clear agenda of how this was going to advance her work. But it was not, I wouldn't describe it as either immature or mature. It was simply a very clearly worked out agenda that was not going to be accomplished otherwise. But it was early because she wanted to absorb this set of things into then what her final dissertation would be. So I mean, so again, recognize, and as Juliet said, I think they try very hard to recognize that research is various and very much a plurality of different things that are all very good research, and to recognize that and look for excellence within each one, and that you don't have to fit your research to some other paradigm to be a winner.
The cusp of ABD sounds, I feel like JP, you just echoed that. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of students come to our center working really hard in their second year because of the course load they're taking to like make a compelling case that on top of, so that may matter, your discipline may matter too, like what you're able to do in a second year. Some disciplines it just may not be.
Consultation with mentors, advisors, DGS is really important. Who can help you figure out exactly that.
But it sounds from JB's point, like you can sell the timing, might be a really good thing to sell in your proposal. This is why I need to do this now. A year from now may be too late, because I'll already be writing.
And I guess my gut would be, these things are always hard, they're very competitive, but I wouldn't worry about taking a risk or two. If you really think, because often the risks, high risk is also high reward, and that can be seen. That's super exciting. Yeah, it might not work out the way, so man, that's super exciting. And that can be enough to say this is.
Just knowing that, there's that openness to that, the whole process of the research, it morphs, and whether that's something that it's completely okay, then that's great.
I had a related question with the research, more if it's human subjects and requires an IRB, how do you navigate, since I feel like the IRB kind of more strictly, but you're also hoping to engage as faculty mentor in some of the discussion of the methods, so navigating already having a pending IRB with hoping the methods will develop because of this collaboration.
So if you already have a pending, I mean, this is a grad school rule on the human subjects thing, so I'm not answering this very authoritatively. But it seems to me that if your methods change and develop, you just submit another IRB.
I mean, I would think you could say, I've submitted an IRB for this, with this individual or with this center. I may question this aspect of it. I would think you could say that. My subjects are all dead or fictional, so never had to file an IRB.
So even if like just a part of our research involves human subject, like it's essential that we include IRB?
So, you know, there are many things that can be exempt from the IRB, but you still have to go through the application process. And I don't know, Susanna, do you have any sense of this? Do you guys?
Like there's no way to like apply later for
Well,
IRB?
you can do a decision, this is true for students also, so we do this with faculty projects all the time, we just put in a decision letter, and 99% of the time, because we have public use data, they come back as non-human subjects, but then you have a letter from IRB that says we have done, so decision letter's quick and easy relative to IRB, so I always tell people to default on the side of doing a decision letter, but
Well, wouldn't that be specific to the dissertation project itself? Just the
Yeah.
fellowship is not
Well,
human subjects
gonna
research.
right, no, so this is entirely what the grad school says about this, but if they just say it's sufficient to say you have applied or you are applying to the IRB, then that's certainly sufficient for us.
But your point is that this you need to do for your dissertation work anyway. That's
Right.
not specific to the
Yeah.
IDF at all, so you should clarify that with your advisor whether you need to do an IRB or not, and likely is going through the process.
but you do
Yeah.
have to provide it as part of the application.
Absolutely, and I think there's a thing where it
If you're
says,
at that stage.
if you're at that stage,
Yes,
right?
if you were
Right.
doing humans, I would err on the side of having some contact with the IR. I mean, you wouldn't want to not get the award. How would they do that?
I think that there is a thing that says pending on it. I think you can say it's, I have filed an IRB, right?
Yes.
Or a decision, but it's definitely something you should clear with your advisor and your committee. It's beyond the scope of the idea. And that thing is the case for every graduate school award. It's standard, how they treat IRBs. Sorry.
There's a question waiting back here
Yeah.
for a long time. I want to make sure we get time.
So many of us, I think, have dissertations that will include either 3 chapters or 3 projects of some kind, and they're all, tied together with a common thread. Is there a limitation if, let's say, you really need some kind of interdisciplinary support for one of the projects? Do you need to go into a lot of detail on what else you're doing, or can you make the case for that one specific project?
I think you can make the case for that one specific piece of the project.
I think almost all the ones we've housed have been that way, maybe just the nature of the disciplines we were, but maybe it's true across them, but I feel like, and that also addresses the problem of how to get it all in 2 pages.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier if it's one specific.
You could say, this is what my dissertation research is on. A key component is this. For that, I need this.
Okay.
I cannot get that in my home department because my department does this or program does this. Therefore, I need to go over there.
That's what I've most commonly seen, is people will give a brief overview of the broader project, but then focus the proposal on which aspect of the project will be benefiting from the idea.
And I think that might help too with the fact that a lot of us, or not a lot of us, but for those of us that are a little later in the stage of application, it may be just that 3rd paper hasn't been fully developed yet or something.
And it may also apply in terms of the IRB that if what you're really going to be working on this year is not related to human subjects, I mean, I think you still have to tick whatever boxes the grad school asks you to do for this. But you could say, this part of this work is not related to human subjects. But I would still caution you to do whatever the grad school says. I want to say that we are at time now, and I just want to say thank you to Lydia Garver and Shireen Sabat from Icgc and Susanna Smith from IAS. We'll post the videotape on the IAS's website, YouTube channel.
And we'll share it with other centers so you can use it too.
And some of us may have a few minutes to stay around and answer more questions, but I just wanted to acknowledge that we were at time and say thank you to the organizers, to CSPW